The sun was bleeding behind the ridges, casting long, trembling shadows across the Virginia wilderness. Every leaf seemed alive with whispered secrets, every rustle a potential threat. Sergeant Nathaniel Hayes pressed his face close to the saddle horn, feeling the pulse of his horse under him. The animal was restless, snorting through flared nostrils, sensing the tension in the air. Hayes gripped the reins tighter. His orders were clear, yet the weight of them seemed to double with every mile. Deliver a message from General Lee to the outlying Confederate unit before dawn, crossing enemy lines that swelled like a dark, breathing tide. Failure wasn't just personal disgrace. It could cost dozens of lives. The forest around him held its breath. The trees, gnarled and towering, were silhouettes against a fading sky. Shadows pooled between their roots like waiting predators. He adjusted his cloak, feeling the damp chill of early April seep through the fabric. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cried, a stark, lonely note that made his chest tighten. Nathaniel's mind wandered to his family. He thought of the small cabin near Lynchburg, of the scent of his mother's baking, and of the way his younger brother had looked at him before he left, eyes full of unspoken questions. Could he keep them safe? Could he even come back? A twig snapped sharply, and he jerked forward instinctively, heart hammering. Silence returned, oppressive and thick. "Get it together, Nate," he muttered to himself, his voice low, almost drowned by the wind in the pines. His hand brushed the letter tucked inside his coat, a simple parchment that bore the weight of strategy and lives. Every line of ink seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, urging him onward, warning him. The forest road narrowed, a mere trace between moss-covered trunks. Each step of his horse on the damp earth seemed amplified, echoing in the hollow spaces of his mind. He felt eyes on him, though he knew they belonged only to the shadows. Paranoia and caution were companions on this journey, inseparable from the duty that propelled him. A sudden rustle from the underbrush froze him mid-thought. Hayes pressed himself closer to his horse's neck, listening. There it was again, a soft murmur of movement, deliberate and careful. Enemy patrols. He remembered the training drills. Slow, measured breaths. Blend with the shadows. Never let them know you are near. The horse hesitated at the narrow pass, and Nathaniel's palm stroked its mane. "Easy, easy," he whispered. Minutes felt like hours. He counted silently, eyes scanning for glints of metal or the silhouette of a gun barrel. Then a figure emerged, low and cautious, scanning the trees. Hayes froze, heart in his throat. The patrol passed, unaware, the tension coiling tighter in his chest, ready to spring at any misstep. Only when the sound faded did he exhale, a whisper of relief that melted instantly into the night air. He knew the worst part wasn't being caught. It was imagining what could happen if he failed. Lives would be lost. Orders ignored. Futures erased. By the time night draped itself over the forest, Hayes had reached the edge of a swollen creek. The water gurgled over stones, cold and relentless. Moonlight dappled the surface, silver and deceptive. He tied the horse, checking the harness and the letter once more. Every noise felt amplified. The slap of water against rocks, the distant owl's call, the whispering wind. Crossing would be dangerous. Enemy scouts often waited near rivers, assuming that only the desperate would risk the current. Nathaniel mounted carefully, feeling the horse's muscles tense beneath him. Step by step, they entered the water, the chill biting through leather and wool. His teeth clenched. The creek fought back, but so did he, a silent oath driving him onward. Halfway across, he paused, ears straining. Nothing. Only the murmur of water and the distant rumble of cannon fire. Far off, yet a constant reminder of the chaos creeping toward him. He pressed forward, finally reaching the opposite bank, soaked, but unseen. A soft sound reached him from the trees. A twig, a faint exhale. He froze, recognizing the rhythm, the precision of trained soldiers moving quietly through the night. Hayes melted into shadow, pulling the horse behind a thicket, heart hammering so violently it seemed audible. Minutes dragged. The patrol passed, and he waited long after they vanished, afraid even to move. Only when silence claimed the forest again did he allow himself a breath, shallow and shaky. "One step closer," he murmured. "One step closer to Lee, to duty." He remounted, adjusting the letter against his chest. Ahead, the forest thickened, darkness pooling like ink. Somewhere in that blackness lay the next challenge, the next risk. But Nathaniel rode on, alone, carrying the fragile hope that he could be the thread holding countless lives together, even if he did not know whether he would see the sunrise again. The trees grew denser, branches intertwining like fingers of a dark hand trying to stop him. Nathaniel's eyes darted constantly, catching every flicker of movement, every glint of moonlight on steel. The forest had a rhythm now, a heartbeat in shadow, and he was learning to move with it, to become part of its pulse, silent and deliberate. His horse's hooves sank slightly into the muddy soil, the scent of damp earth mingling with smoke carried from distant fires. The first echoes of artillery reached him, a low, ominous rumble that vibrated through the ground and up into his bones. Hayes froze, listening. The sounds weren't close yet, but they were coming from the direction of Chancellorsville. Memories of training surged. Keep your mind clear, trust your instincts, move only when necessary. He pressed the letter closer to his chest, imagining General Lee's eyes on him, the expectations of men who depended on every ounce of his courage. The night was no longer just darkness. It was a test. As he rode, Nathaniel's thoughts returned to home again. He recalled the morning he had left, Mother's hands trembling as she handed him a small folded handkerchief. "Keep this close," she had whispered, "for luck and for the heart you carry." A sudden rustle made him spin. The forest seemed alive with ghosts, memories and shadows mingling until he could no longer tell which was real. For a moment, fear clawed at him. What if this night was the one that would write his name into history, not as a hero, but as a casualty? But then he remembered why he rode. The men depending on him, the letter that carried hope through the fog of war. The thought steadied his hands, and he urged the horse forward, deeper into the black embrace of the forest. A faint glimmer of movement caught the corner of his eye. Nathaniel froze, heart hammering. Figures crouched behind trees, Union scouts moving silently, hunting for anyone who dared cross this cursed ground. He pressed his horse flat against the undergrowth, lowering his profile, every muscle coiled. A twig snapped underfoot. He winced, but the enemy had not noticed. They moved on, methodical, like shadows themselves. Only when they vanished into the dark did Nathaniel exhale. His pulse thudded in his ears. "Every step a gamble," he muttered. He adjusted the letter, feeling the weight of every life it could save, or doom if it never reached its destination. He pushed forward, the night stretching endlessly ahead, a gauntlet of uncertainty. By the small hours, he reached a steep ravine where the moonlight barely touched the jagged rocks and the rushing creek far below. The path across was narrow, slick with mud and leaves. One misstep, one slip, and the river would claim both horse and rider. Nathaniel dismounted, feeling the raw tension in his legs. He guided the horse slowly, inch by precarious inch, whispering encouragements to the animal. The wind whistled through the rocks, carrying with it distant cries of men, battlefields that were waking in the early dawn. Halfway across, A sudden splash startled him. His heart stopped, every nerve on fire. But it was only a stone dislodged by his horse's hoof. Still, the reminder was sharp. The line between survival and disaster was a hair's breadth, and every decision counted. Emerging from the ravine, Nathaniel saw smoke curling over the trees. The distant horizon was lit in streaks of orange and gray, the unmistakable glow of a battlefield waking. The air smelled of fire and gunpowder, a scent that churned his stomach but steeled his resolve. He crouched behind a fallen log, surveying the chaos from a safe distance. Cannon roared intermittently, horses screamed in panic, men shouted orders and warnings. He thought of the letter tucked in his coat, the message that could tip the scales, guide reinforcements, and save countless lives. Failure was not an option. A sudden rustle nearby brought him back to the present. Another patrol, this time Confederate. Relief washed over him, mixed with tension. He needed to pass undetected, to continue his ride, to reach the command post. As he rode past, one of the soldiers glanced in his direction. For a heartbeat, Nathaniel felt his courage waver. What if someone recognized him? What if a single mistake erased all he had endured to this point? He focused on the rhythm of his horse, the sound of the wind through the trees, the weight of the letter. Each breath was a battle, each step a victory over doubt. The night had tested him, the forest had tried to claim him, and yet he rode on, closer now to the heart of the battle, closer to the answers he carried in ink and paper. The forest thinned. Ahead lay the outskirts of the battlefield. The sounds of war were louder now, more immediate, more visceral. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He could see the flicker of flames, hear the distant cries of men and horses, smell the thick, acrid smoke drifting across the fields. The final stretch would be the hardest. Every instinct screamed danger. Every shadow could conceal death. But Nathaniel Hayes was a soldier of duty, and he rode onward, the weight of the night pressing down, yet driving him ever forward. The forest finally gave way to open fields scarred by the passage of men and horses. The horizon was a shifting haze of smoke and gunfire, the distant thunder of cannons rolling like an omen. Nathaniel slowed his horse, squinting through the dim dawn light. Every instinct screamed caution, every nerve burned with tension. He remembered the letter, pressed against his chest. One misstep, one moment of hesitation, and it could fall into enemy hands, or worse, never reach those who depended on it. The weight of responsibility was suffocating, yet somehow it drove him forward. The sounds of battle grew sharper. The sharp crack of rifles, the low moan of wounded men, the frantic calls of officers attempting to restore order amidst chaos. Nathaniel adjusted his grip on the reins, his jaw tight. This was no longer a forest or a ravine. This was the beating heart of war, and he was riding straight into it. He dismounted near a copse of trees, taking a moment to observe the Confederate positions ahead. Soldiers moved with grim determination, unaware of the small figure approaching, a lone courier in tattered gray. Nathaniel ducked low, pressing his horse into the undergrowth. Thoughts of home and family flickered through his mind again. He thought of the handkerchief his mother had given him, the last memory of innocence before the war claimed everything. He closed his eyes briefly, drawing strength from the memory, letting it steel him for the final stretch. The sun broke through the clouds in thin, trembling rays, illuminating the battlefield. Every shadow could conceal an enemy rifle, every movement might betray him. But he pressed onward, stepping into the line of danger with the resolve of a man who carried more than a letter. He carried hope. A sudden volley erupted from the enemy lines, bullets whistling overhead. Nathaniel pressed his horse into a gallop, heart hammering, sweat stinging his eyes. The world narrowed to the rhythm of hooves on hard ground, the letter tucked safely against his chest, the distant roar of battle guiding him forward. He ducked behind a fallen cannon, breath ragged, eyes scanning for the safest path. Men fell around him, shouts and cries blending into a surreal cacophony. He felt a pang of guilt, guilt for those who could not be saved, guilt for the lives hanging on the fragile thread he carried. Then, glimpsing the command post ahead, he straightened. Relief mingled with fear. He was almost there. Almost. Nathaniel burst through the perimeter, dismounted, and handed the letter to a waiting officer. The officer's eyes widened as he read, a quick nod of understanding passing between them. Orders would be relayed, reinforcements could be deployed, lives might be spared. Yet even as he exhaled, the sound of distant cannon fire reminded him that the war was far from over. He had completed his duty, but the battlefield was indifferent. The faces of the men he had seen, the friends he might never meet again, lingered in his mind. The price of service was heavy, and the night he had survived left its mark on his soul. He rode back through the thinning forest, the sun higher now, casting long shadows across the fields. Silence, for the first time, seemed almost deafening. The battlefield still burned in the distance, but here, in the quiet of the trees, Nathaniel could hear his own heartbeat, steadying after the storm. Memories of home returned, stronger now, mingling with the image of the soldiers he had seen, the cries and whispers that haunted him. He realized that the war would continue, that battles would rage, and that courage often came without recognition. But he had delivered the letter, fulfilled his duty, and survived the night. That in itself was a triumph. As he paused at the edge of a hill, Nathaniel gazed at the horizon. Smoke still drifted from the distant lines, a grim reminder that this night, this ride, was but one thread in a tapestry of conflict. The wind carried the scent of fire and earth, and he knew the world would demand more of him, of every man in gray. He adjusted the letter once more, now empty of its words, but heavy with significance. He whispered a silent promise, to the men, to his family, to himself, that he would continue to ride, to endure, to bear the weight of war with quiet courage. And as the sun rose fully, painting the fields in harsh light, Nathaniel Hayes disappeared into the shadows of the forest once more, leaving behind only the echo of hooves and the faintest trace of hope. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the next battle awaited, and he would meet it just as he had met this one,